So, one thing I hear from a lot of people getting divorced is I have a really controlling spouse. He or she has always been controlling. And when you add divorce into the mix, that can be really stressful and really complicated. It can be tough, it can feel draining, and it can feel intimidating. The person can be like a bully if they're controlling. So, today I want to dedicate this episode to talking about my spouse is controlling and what that means during divorce. My guest in this episode is Jason Tuckman. Jason is a divorce attorney and partner for Murata and Tuckman out of Maywood, New Jersey. And he has been practicing law for 22 years and definitely has seen his share of controlling spouses. So, welcome, Jason.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And do you agree with me that having a controlling spouse during a divorce is probably not the easiest thing, and why?
Yes, I do agree. I think having a controlling spouse is not the easiest thing during a marriage, and certainly during a divorce. And it is a very common theme that I hear when I meet with clients. And it is difficult because divorce, going through that process, it challenges the controlling spouse too, because they are in the process through this divorce of losing control. And that sometimes makes their actions even more extreme. So, whether I can't tell the reason why, but when spouses or partners are losing control, they will do what they can to maintain the control. So that often involves prolonging the divorce process or intentionally causing chaos or controlling finances, restricting access to money and funds, filing motions or applications with the court that are not necessary, refusing to communicate. All of those are really examples of ways that a spouse or partner can control the divorce litigation and prevent it from moving on smoothly and efficiently.
So you rattled those off pretty
Yeah, I
quickly.
know. Just sorry, just a couple of what came to mind.
Well, no, I mean, you rattled those off like you are very familiar with this. And why do you think that a controlling spouse, or maybe just anyone, maybe you're not even a controlling person, but when you get divorced, you want to keep control of things? Why do you think people do that? Is it insecurity, stress, the way to calm themselves down? I mean, why be controlling?
Yeah, I mean, divorce is hard. It's a major change, and I think that uh, people are often scared of change, and so once the divorce occurs, if there is a spouse that has controlling tendencies, the ability to control the spouse is no longer there. You're divorced. You don't have control over the person's life or finances or custody or children or anything like that. So yeah, I think that when there is a controlling spouse in the mix, that spouse wants to maintain that control for as long as possible, because perhaps without it, they won't know what to do.
Right. They don't even know how to not have control. They're not used to it. And so now that they're losing control, they're flipping out and they could react it with even trying to take control more. Now, let's talk about how children are part of this equation. So, in what way is a controlling spouse going to try to manipulate the kid, in the divorce?
Yeah, certainly making issues, custody issues. But sometimes I see frequently making allegations about the other parent as being a bad parent, or a parent who shouldn't have custody or parenting time. Sometimes there's extreme examples of abuse or neglect of the child, but really just, these are folks that had raised a family and there were no issues, but now in a divorce, what might not have been an issue before becomes an issue. And that's how a controlling spouse can continue to maintain control by using the kids almost, hate to say, but as weapons in this litigation to get what they want and to maintain control. Because again, once there's an agreement on the custody and parenting time, it's a court order and it's enforceable, and the ability to dictate or control terms goes away. So it's just a way to continue to exert that control over a spouse. And using the kids, it's terrible.
Now, do you ever see people who just don't adhere to the court order and then their spouse has to take them back to court because they're so controlling? So they're like, I'm not going to listen to this. I didn't want this custody arrangement and I'm not doing it. And so
Yes, sadly, that does happen. I mean, it's a court order should be followed, but it's it does not always happen, and it involves enforcement and going back to court and having a judge enforce what he or she had already decided or already ordered.
you're listening to the divorce. Okay. Okay, he's definitely feeling better. All right, we're gonna have to edit that part out. So can you just hold him? Oh my God, my son, we're so happy that he's barking. Okay. You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And I am here today with divorce attorney and partner Jason Tuckman. Jason is a partner with Murata and Tuckman. He's been practicing divorce law for 22 years. And today we're talking about when you are trying to divorce a controlling spouse. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to ask you, Jason, about is it possible to mediate with a controlling spouse? And then I want to get into other tips in dealing with a controlling spouse during divorce. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Do you have a controlling spouse that you are trying to divorce? That's what we're talking about today. My guest is Jason Tuckman, divorce attorney and partner with Murata and Tuckman. Jason brings 22 years of experience. If you like what you hear and you want to consult with him, you can reach him at Murata. No, is it the same website? Tell me the website, Jason. Can we edit
It,
that out? Sorry. Okay. Jason, what's your website where people can reach you?
it's kkmtlegal.com.
And you can also find him at what's your email address?
J Tuckman, that's JTUCHMAN at kkmtlegal.com.
And phone number?
201-368-7713.
Okay. Let's move on. How do you feel about mediation with someone who's controlling? Is it possible?
It's possible. It's not impossible. It is possible, but it requires some steps to level the playing field there. So certainly attorneys, having an attorney present on your behalf if you feel that the other spouse is controlling. And I would also suggest that the parties not be in the same room for the mediation, that they be kept in separate rooms with their attorneys, and that the mediator go back and forth and speak with the parties separately.
Interesting. Okay. Has anyone ever said, let's say somebody says, okay, they're a controlling person. They say, yeah, I'll go to mediation, or the judge orders mediation. You have to go to mediation. Do you ever say to the controlling person, look, this is a process with a neutral. You're not going to have as much control as you like, but you'll have some, like, is there any reasoning with the controlling person?
Uh, yes, but it does help if they have an attorney. If they're self-represented, it makes it more difficult because they still think that they're in control of the process, when even in that forum and mediation, the mediator's really in control of the process. So it's helpful to have a strong mediator, one that can really exert her his presence over the controlling spouse, and remind the controlling spouse that the mediator's in charge, and this is how it's going to be. The same way if they were in the courtroom, the judge has to remind the parties that it's the judge's courtroom, not the controlling spouse's courtroom.
Right. Now, you also talked about, I want to tell my listeners, Jason wrote this article for Divorced Girl Smiling called My Spouse is Controlling, What That Means During Divorce. You can find it at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. But you wrote here that with controlling spouses, finances are often weaponized. They might conceal assets, downplay their income to decrease your share in the settlement, delay alimony, not pay child support, causing strain and pressure on a person. And oh no, they try to get you to settle quickly. That I never heard of.
Yeah, on their terms.
Mhm.
So that's right. They try to pull a fast one and control the outcome and, try to sell a bag of goods or whatever that expression is to get a deal that is in their favor. Controlling spouses don't just appear in a divorce. Typically, they've been controlling throughout the marriage. So generally, not all the times, but generally, they have a greater understanding of the finances. They control the money, and they have just more information and knowledge about the marital financial circumstances than the other spouse. So
Right.
the controlling spouse then has that ability to withhold income or to say that he or she does or doesn't have certain assets or what they're worth. And as we just talked about, put a deal in front of the other spouse and say, this is a good deal for you. You should sign it and we can be done. It gives that other spouse the out, right? This if you're married to a controlling spouse and this is your chance to get out, maybe you jump at it, but sacrifice yourself financially because you want to be out of this controlling
Because you're
situation.
so relieved to be away from the person, but really you're saying, don't do it. It's a bad deal.
Correct.
Or at
Yes.
least talk to your lawyer before
Talk to
doing
your
it.
lawyer first because yes, if you might have the benefit of getting out of this controlling relationship, but if it puts you, in a tough spot financially, you might be getting less than you're entitled to, and it may not be worth it just for the shortcut of ending the divorce process quickly.
And if you've been living with the person for 25 years, if you can just hold on a little bit longer, you're going to get a fair settlement instead of just rushing into it to get rid of that person.
That's right. You got to take your time when you're going through this, and what's another couple months? I know it's hard. It's difficult to be in that situation, but you really only get one chance to negotiate a divorce settlement. So you want to make sure that you do it right and that you could live after the divorce.
And you don't want to have to go back to post lit. I mean, you could go back for anything, but you don't want to have to go to post litigation. Believe me, been there, done that. Not a good idea. All right,
Right.
let's get into tips for dealing with a controlling spouse. So you wrote a few tips here, and the first one was have proper documentation.
Yes. Document, document, document. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. That's what I say. So conversations, even if it's about, making changes to a parenting schedule or financial agreements, everything should be in a written communication, even if it's just a confirmation, so that there can't be any issues about what was said or what was done after the fact. If there's any agreements, if there's any understandings of financial support, or if there's just any examples or incidents of this controlling behavior. It's helpful to make a log and to keep, a journal of what happens, because if this process lasts 3 months, 6 months, and you're in September, you may not remember exactly what happened in February or March or when it happened. So it's very important to keep track of when things happen and what happened so that you can have access to it later on when needed.
Okay, I want to tell my listeners a couple of tips. So when Jason says emails, texts, or texts, I'm not sure, but any emails, always answer and respond to emails as if you think the judge is seeing all of this. So whenever you're angry, do not send it. You can just write something for yourself, but don't send it. Every single email, say to yourself, what would happen if a judge saw this? Would it hurt my case? If not, you can answer. And then I know like I have Google email. take every single email from your spouse and put it into a folder so that you have all your emails with your ex in one place. So if you ever need them, you know exactly where they are and you don't have to just go searching for them. And the other thing is, a journal is so important. Not only will it make you feel so much better about, like, writing helps validate your feelings, but it will make you feel like, okay, now I have proof. It's very good for people emotionally, but as Jason is telling you, it can also help you in court and in the divorce process.
Absolutely. And if there's any second thoughts about why you're going through this process, when you look back at that journal and you see those all those examples and history, it might validate your feelings and what you're going through also.
Yeah, right, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, number two, set boundaries.
Yes. So again, it's if you're only going to communicate with your spouse in email or writing, let your spouse know that, and set that boundary and stick to it. That's often the difficult part is following through with your boundaries. Because if you say, I'm only going to email you, then when your spouse calls you, you don't answer, you respond with an email as if the judge is going to see it, and you don't call your spouse because then you're really ignoring your own boundaries, and you have to really show the by sometimes by example how those boundaries need to remain. A lot of times, a spouse will go overboard and violate those boundaries, whether that's by harassment or incessant calls or texts. And that boundary you should set if you feel fearful for your safety, or if there's harassment going on, filing for a restraining order to stop that communication. That's another way to really set a boundary and prevent a controlling spouse from peppering or hammering you to get for him or her to get what he or she wants.
And it's really scary to think about a restraining order, but sometimes use your gut and really think about your safety, and you'll be thankful you did it, even though it's very uncomfortable and hard and scary to do.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be for threats of physical violence. If in New Jersey, if your spouse is harassing you, which is incessant communications with the purpose to annoy you, so 100 texts in an hour, that's harassment. That could be the basis for a restraining order.
Number three, safeguard your finances. So you say consider opening separate bank accounts, a credit card, a regular checking account, like just for yourself to prevent unauthorized transactions. Do people actually do this, Jason?
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit earlier about how a spouse might control his spouse, and that's with the finances, restricting access to money or not putting money into a joint account. So the benefit of establishing separate accounts is that you will know that you have independent resources to meet expenses. Worst case scenario, you don't want to be at the gas tank trying to fill up, your car, and your spouse has cut off your credit card, and that's the only credit card you have. So yes, having your own credit card, your own credit, at least in an emergency, can be helpful and beneficial. Same with bank accounts, and that doesn't resolve the issue of what happens if your spouse isn't giving you money, but you might have to neutralize that by filing an application with the court so that the court can decide how much support your spouse should give you, and your spouse should not be controlling how you spend your money. That's the point, that you have an account and that you can use it, and hopefully you're not online at the checkout for groceries and bouncing checks or not having enough money in the account to do that. I do also see spouses who will spend down a joint account or joint credit card for the purposes of ruining the credit of the other spouse. So establishing those
Wow.
separate accounts will allow you to maintain your own credit, and hopefully without fear that your controlling spouse might try to damage your own financial independence.
Well, I just thought of something else. Let's say you don't have your own credit card and you go out to dinner, and then your spouse says, "Why were you out here this night? Who were you with? Were you on a date?" Um, Of course, I think the date should pay, but that's another, but like,
Right,
oh, why were you out for drinks? Did you get a sitter? I
yeah,
mean, then it could be used against you. You don't need your ex knowing what you're doing. And
right.
having your own credit card allows you to have more freedom in life and be less controlled. And you don't have to explain yourself either.
Right. I hear that a lot too. My spouse goes through the credit card statements line by line and asks why I spent this amount at that store. What did I buy here? What did I buy there? And that's living under the microscope like that is not a way to live. That really is the definition the definition of a controlling spouse, looking at every dollar dime that was spent and questioning it. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Jackie. That
I
will allow
think that one of the biggest things about a controlling spouse, and I think you said this earlier, is really finances. That's what people try to control the most. And I
absolutely.
think there are a lot of people who control people because they think if I don't control her or maybe him financially, they're going to leave me. And so they want to control for that reason. So I'm
Yes.
sure you see that. Okay, last tip
Yes.
because we're
Okay.
running out of time here. Prioritize self-care. So self-care is such a buzzword and everybody's talking about it, but why is it so important when it comes to having a controlling spouse?
Look, I think living and divorcing a controlling spouse can be exhausting. It is filled with stress and anxiety. It can cause depression. It has an effect on mental health, and taking care of yourself is a way to deal with that emotional mental health. So it isn't a luxury here. Taking care of yourself is not a luxury. It's really something that you have to do because a controlling spouse is going to be more draining. It's going to wear on people more than in a situation where there is not such a controlling spouse. So that's really what I mean. Make sure you have support from family and friends, even if it's a mental health professional, and take care of yourself emotionally as well as physically. So if that's finding something you do that you enjoy, that you where you can relax, that's important to really survive through this process because otherwise it will drain you.
I couldn't agree more. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of people working with divorce coaches during divorce. And I think that when you are getting divorced from a controlling spouse, it's even more important because you have this support of your divorce coach to help you along with somebody who will listen and validate your feelings when you say, here's what he or she did to me during the process. This is what I'm dealing with right now. And to have somebody there to support you and offer you suggestions on how to handle that is so important. So I just want to give a plug to all of the divorce coaches in the Divorce Girl Smiling Trusted Professional section. You can find like six different coaches, and they're all amazing. They all have different niches. So just go to Divorce Girl Smiling, go to Trusted Professionals, and look up coaches. So on that note, Jason, I can't believe we're out of time. Just
That went
wanted to
fast.
say thank you so much for being here. I love the advice you give. You bring so much experience, and tell my listeners once again where they can find you.
Well, Jackie, thank you again so much for having me. Thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this. I really appreciate it. I am located in Maywood, New Jersey, which is Bergen County. My website is kkmtlegal.com. My phone number 201-368-7713. And my email address is jtuchman@kkmtlegal.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Jason. And to my listeners, you can also find Jason in the Trusted Professionals section of Divorce Girl Smiling. And if you go to divorcedgirlsmiling.com, you can listen to more podcasts, read articles, download my mobile app, or sign up for my free consult. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.